name is Karatzas. I'm a graduate of DMI. I graduated in 2005, along with some of you here. And I run a small interaction design firm in Portsmouth called Proximity Lab. And I've been involved with the program really since I graduated in a variety of ways and tried to stay connected to the family as much as possible. We've got a great panel discussion for you today. Before we get started, I'm going to have Kunta come up and just say a couple of quick thank yous.
Hi, everybody, again. I just wanted to thank the people who helped Joe put together this event. Heather, Layla, Evan, Tuyen, Andrew, and Fred. Thank you so much. I think we owe them an applause.
She said she was going to be brief. That was brief. So, the panel discussion, thinking about the framework of a 15-year retrospective, it obviously got me thinking about what was happening, back in 2001. And certainly a lot has changed in terms of technology, certainly in terms of the role that design plays in business and in consumers' lives. One of the things that struck me was there's a real parallel for me personally in terms of my own career and thinking about how the digital design, sort of interaction design space has grown up over this period. And when I think about the period of 2001, this is really the end of this early phase of the web, right? So the web is 5-6 years old in terms of really being a force, something that businesses are trying to make sense of and think about how the web is going to relate to the way they interact with their customers and each other. And it was a very, having a front row seat at that time, having run a business as a lot of you had at that time, it was a very, very crazy, confusing time. It was a gold rush mentality. There was a lot of kind of rushing to build things before any real, any good questions were being asked. And for me, this sort of period of 2001, 2002 really marks a shift in sort of leaving that early stage, that gold rush mentality, and really starting to enter a more thoughtful phase of interaction design, digital communication, where certainly the big crash of where the bubble burst in 2002, it was a major reset for a lot of businesses and certainly a lot of us that were practicing at the time. It was a wake-up call, and it certainly in my business, I realized how unprepared I was for a lot of those events. There was a lot of hiring, basically just projects falling out of the sky, growing very quickly, and then realizing when that crash happened that there were some real business fundamentals that were missing from a lot of the work that we were doing. So I look at this as sort of a really interesting pivot point in our industry, and for me personally, of really starting to look back in the mirror and say, okay, what is my role in this, and what do I want out of this career? And actually going back to grad school, right around that time, I came back to MassArt at 2002, graduated in 2005, and that was a really important part of my own transition, really taking some time to reevaluate who I was and what I wanted out of my career. And I owe a lot to MassArt for giving me that opportunity. So, in the sort of years that followed, I think we got to see a maturity start to develop. Certainly the tools and technologies got better, and I think again we were asking some better questions about return on investment, about what we would expect from the things that we were building, and I think that to me that colors a lot of what I'm happy about in terms of the last 15 years of progress. What I want to do just before we jump into the panel discussion, and I'll introduce our panelists, is just take us back a little bit to 2001. And I guess the first question I want to ask the audience, anybody have an idea what the top visited site was in 2001? Any guesses? I was way off when I. What's that? Ask Jeeves? No. AOL? No. Number 2 was Yahoo. Number 3 was eBay. Neo. not Pence.com. And number 5 was GoToMedia. No Google on this list. Google was number 12, actually. Right, so this is a time when there was obviously a very big shift. I think we were still map questing to get around probably right around this time. No Facebook here, right? This is a few years before Facebook would even come on the scene. To give you a sense of what websites looked like then, this was Yahoo's homepage. Right, great. And this was the New York Times. So, very different space. 2001 was also the year this guy was introduced. Luckily, there's no sign of him now. But and then in terms of design tools, this Photoshop 6 is what we were using, and this is a look at what Flash. Flash was obviously playing a big role at the time, and more dynamic experiences on the web. And if something looks strange about these, the most popular browser or screen resolution was 800 by 600. So 2/3 of the screens were below 1024 by 4. So you're talking about very small screens. There's no real mobile design happening at this point. Laptops kind of look like this, pretty chunky. In terms of mobile, these were the kinds of devices that were really leading at that point. The iPhone at this point basically looked like this, right? So this is the year that iPod was out, and when you just look at the screens here and the opportunities for real immersive interaction, they're practically non-existent. We've really come a long way. This was introduced that same year in 2001 at the Consumer Electronics Show as a mobile web browser. So this big chunky thing was proposed as a way that you could browse the web while you're traveling, and this was sort of wearable technology. This also introduced at the Consumer Electronics Show that same year. Fast forward 15 years, we kind of know what world we live in now. Wearable, Internet of Things. The move, bless you, the move away from desktop computing has been very, very swift. And it's obviously still continuing now. These are the kinds of experiences that we're able to have now, and this is what our computers look like today. So it's really been quite a shift. It obviously has affected. It's really improved all the opportunities we have in terms of design and engagement with customers and with each other, and in terms of the real profound impact it's had on sort of disruptive business models. You think about now. Companies like Airbnb, Uber, Spotify, when you think about how you would consume these services 15 years ago, Apple Store wasn't even around, so the idea of like iTunes had not even really launched at that point. So it's easy to forget how far we've come in such a short amount of time. The focus of the discussion today, I really want to pay particular attention to the role of design in business and sort of how that has changed over the years and how we see it continuing to change. So what I'd like to do is introduce our speakers, our roundtable participants. This is the official title of our talk today: the evolving role of design and technology in business and culture. And for the panelists, I'm going to read some very short bios for each of them, and we're going to go from your left over. So Brady Bonus is a principal in experience design at MadPow. Creating inspiring user experiences has been Brady's focus for the last 20 years. He combines a logical approach, process, and methodology with emotive, creative, and the unexpected whenever possible. Brady draws on his past experience as an artist, visual designer, web developer, and user experience architect to lead MadPow's design team in creating thoughtful, simple, and delightful user experiences. Brady is a graduate of the University of Michigan, where he earned his degree in fine arts with a concentration in illustration, design, and sculpture. Welcome, Brady. Elyse Bogas, senior UX UI designer at Drift. Elyse is a product designer with a special love for storytelling and startups. Her process is rooted in content-driven design and is reinforced with iterative research methods. She strives to engage audiences and add tangible value with experiences that are both immersive and thoughtful. Elyse is a senior designer at Drift, a Cambridge-based startup that makes it easy for businesses to talk to their website visitors and customers. Before Drift, she worked at Runkeeper, where she was mobile product designer and helped pioneer Runkeeper's strategic partnership movement with companies like Spotify, Microsoft, and ASICS. Welcome, please. Next, Philip Leung, Director of UX Design for Altitude Inc. Philip Leung is a Director of User Experience Design there and leads the UX team in designing and shaping experiences both on physical products and digital applications. He's consulted companies like Anheuser-Busch, InBev, Bose, Dell, and others. As a former Director of Industrial Design, he brings his human-centered approach and critical thinking to help companies and customers drive value in their engagements. Designer for 20 years, Philip is originally from Hong Kong and received a Bachelor of Industrial Design from the University of Northumbria in Newcastle, England. Welcome. Next, we have Christine Pillsbury, who is a graduate of DMI and graduated in the class that I was in. She's the founder and chief of design for Alter. She's been doing digital and UX before it was called those things and continues to live by the words of Dieter Rams, less but better. She's been creating award-winning, user-centric digital products and marketing campaigns for global brands and innovative startups since 1997. Her client roster includes Athena Health, AT&T, Comcast, Ditto Labs, Deutsche Bank, Fidelity, Human Design Medical, IBM, MSNBC, Puma, Virgin Mobile, and the list goes on. I actually had to trim a few out of her bio. As Chief of Design at Alter, she leads our research and design teams across projects, all the while growing client relationships, going after new business and keeping her hands dirty, sketching, creating flows, writing, and finding design inspiration. Welcome, Christine. Next, the winner of our most traveled panelist award, Paul Plough, who a lot of you know, a friend of DMI, prototype engineer at Apple. Paul is a prototype engineer at Apple with a hybrid background in arts, design, and technology. His work focuses on interaction design for technological innovation. He graduated with a degree in multimedia engineering from Ramon Llull University in Barcelona and holds his master's in cognitive science and interactive media from Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona, as well as a master's in media arts and sciences from MIT's Media Lab, which is much easier to pronounce. He also is a visiting professor at MassArt and has been doing that for years. Previously, he was senior research engineer at Samsung, and continued at Multitouch Barcelona, an interactive artist collaborative that explores natural interaction between people and technology. Paul also acted as creative director for Empirical, a startup that developed new ways for people to communicate through technology. Welcome, Paul. And finally, Chris Whitlock, VP and Executive Creative Director of User Experience Design at Fidelity Investments. Chris has worked in digital UX design and marketing for over 25 years. He's directed design on every technological platform from digital video disc to the iPad for consumer and B2B, with employers ranging from publishing companies to startups. Chris's clients have included FedEx, Microsoft, Harcourt, and Mayo Clinic, and I'm sure quite many more that he hasn't listed here. Chris is currently responsible for leading a team of creative directors at Fidelity Investments that define the look and feel of user experience across multiple business units and platforms. Over the last 6 years, Chris has been part of Fidelity's core design thinking practice. He has helped evangelize and institutionalize design thinking as a tool to improve user experience for customers as well as the staff. How about a round of applause for these panelists? All right, so let's start our panel discussion. It's beyond question how far sort of mobile technology and digital technology in general has evolved over these 15 years, so we don't really need to talk about how much distance has been covered. We're all pretty aware of that. The first question I have for the panel, I'd like to start with you, Chris, at the end, is it's undeniable how far that technology has come. How are your views about the role that technology should play in our lives as consumers and as designers? How have those views changed over that period as technology has played an even more integral role to the way that we spend our time.
Yeah, I think for us at Fidelity, in a traditional business where we thought that there was the critical part of the relationship was very much human, but it was very quick how people adopted that technology and really liked that ability to do something that's very personal, which is their finances, and they like to be able to manage that or experience that as much as they can without having to bother somebody else. But as soon as there's some kind of issue or what the interface traditionally hasn't been able to do is sort of understand where they are emotionally or what they want to do. And I think what we realized that the next technology step is for us to sort of be able to use what we can now through voice recognition, through the way people are even approaching the speed at which they're using computer, is we can start to sense, like, are they upset? Are they tense? Are they just browsing? How can we deliver information that helps with the state of mind that they're in? It's very much like that simple thing when you're on an airplane and the pilot gets on and says, we know there's going to be some turbulence ahead, so just everybody, sit tight, and just knowing that, like anticipating, informing people of what they can expect. I think that for us in our industry is the next thing of being able to understand, like, where are the other places that technology can play a role? What with the newer abilities of technology, how can we enhance that experience so that we're making it more seamless and we're anticipating needs and behaviors?
I'd encourage any panelists to jump right in with additional thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, as a society, we were a lot more forgiving at that time.
Yeah.
If a website loaded and it just spun forever, it was like, oh yeah, it's just new, it's just the technology. But now there's an expectation, there's a much more of a demand that it should just perform right away, that it should give us feedback, it's definitely with like smart technologies, the fact that it should predict what, my life, my schedules on my term, it should all figure that out. And if it doesn't, I'm frustrated with the product, and I may not use the product again. And I think that's the kind of the shift that, from the forgiving to the demanding now, that as a society we've kind of shifted over. And I think that's kind of fascinating and interesting.
I think it's interesting that what people really expect now is to not see technology. They want it to almost get out of the way, right? That when you're forced to consider that there's technology between you and a decision or a result of a decision, that's frustrating. Whereas we used to want this feedback loop of technology telling us that it's working. Now we expect, like the Amazon Echo, all these things that it's like, get out of the way, don't just support me. And almost like the interface can go away if you can make it. It's almost like receding, and the technology is getting more robust and smarter and more intelligent and more sophisticated, but it's also receding from our view a little bit and getting a little bit more, getting less, right? It's getting simpler in terms of our decision and our interface within our interaction with it. I think that's the next challenge, is to have interface-free design, really, or interface-free technology as much as that's possible.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about, why that shift has come about. Do you see this as consumer expectations driving that? Or do you see it more as technology and design practitioners, searching for better ways and expecting more out of the solutions that they develop? Is it a little bit of both? Where do you see this shift coming from?
I think it's a couple of different things. I think the first part of what we were seeing in the internet was we were taking sort of analog ways of doing things, and then we were figuring out, well, how to make it digital. Like, how do you put it online? And now we're saying, oh, well, like, now that it's actually digital, like, we can eliminate whole processes. Why do we can forget the way we used to do analog things we're not trying to make a parallel experience. It's that, I remember the first time going into an Apple store, it was like, you know, how many times have you stood in the line for a register? And then that thing was going, wait a minute, we don't even need registers. We can put a thing on everybody's phone, we can check them out in the middle of the store. Like, you just eliminate the whole checkout experience because suddenly the technology allows you to rethink that paradigm. So I think this is sort of the next wave too, is that now a lot of, you know, the startups are looking at companies like us and saying, now you guys, you put your business model online. We don't need to even imagine that business model anymore because the digital experience is something unique.
Elyse, I think you had a comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, so, I mean, when we're talking, like, I was maybe 11 or 12 when we were doing this. And I remember my parents sent me out with a DCU bank account, and they showed me how to go in and log on and, like, check my bank account status. But now, like, I don't even have to go and check any of that information I have in any of those accounts anymore. Like, I get a thing in my inbox every morning talking about, like, I don't have to go and seek out that information, removing the barriers. It just shows up magically, and I don't even have to think about it. I see it in the morning, split second. And that's kind of that on-demand type of thing that we're talking about.
It's also the shift from human or user-centered design to service design. And in the old days, there was like people designing service, and that services. In the old days, you would go to a branch, you would go and you'd have all these cars. There was a very brick and mortar approach to being a consumer, and now all those businesses are racing to surround themselves around you with technology, so you don't ever have to go anywhere. And it's this, I think that service design piece is really important because people are demanding, users are demanding that the first brand to come and surround themselves around me with their technology, so I don't have to go anywhere, is the winner, right? And I think that that's a lot of what's driving it too.
I mean, you know, my 3-year-old, he just uses his iPad and he interacts with it just like fluently, and like when he goes to the TV, he expects the same things. He expects the same type of interaction, and then they're like, if it doesn't do it, it's like, Daddy, it's broken. You know? and I think, you know, the role that design is playing in the way that we think about it from a business sense is fueling that change. It's kind of, you know, it's applying that same principle but doing it in a different way, and I think that's what's like amazing about what we're doing these days and the challenges that we're pushing in the industry, whether it's like in the consumer space or in the business space.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to hear everyone's thoughts, because if you boil it really down to its fundamentals, in a matter of 20 years, we went from unprecedented ways to access information to unprecedented ways to access services that just disrupt everything. So we go from complete information access, and whether that's a good thing, to it's a utility across every aspect of our lives, to something I think someone, I'm not sure who said it, but it's not going to be too long until those things are, we're still going out and seeking. You know, I mean, the next frontier is everything's going to start coming to us, right? I mean, you see this a bit with predictive aspects of many different things. You know, you like this music, so you're probably going to like this music. Oh, you have this crazy set of eclectic music, so we'll create these playlists for you. But there are a lot of startups in Cambridge working on this. We haven't even touched the surface of predictive artificial capabilities. Everything's very binary. And you know, startups like Nara, who are literally working on artificial intelligences that work more like neural networks in the brain. That's, I mean, to me, I feel like at the rate at which we've come so far, it could be any day now that we wake up and it just changes like that. And you know, with Echo, Amazon Echo would probably be the first wave of it. Zero interface, it's just there.
Yeah.
Chris, did you have one more comment, and I'll I'll ask another question. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, sure.
Okay. Talking about the sort of attitudes about how these technologies have, in some ways, infiltrated our lives, do you consider consumers to be more or less trusting of technology now? Or I think about sort of the early days of e-commerce, where before it was ubiquitous and nobody even thought about whether buying online was an option or not. There was real concerns about whether to trust this, and in some ways those concerns maybe have gone aside, but in other ways privacy concerns are even more pronounced now than they were then. Your thoughts on how has the sort of attitude about the sort of willingness of the consumer to provide sensitive material or to trust the technology you interact with, what's the trajectory been, and where do you see it going? It's a jump ball for anybody.
Can I take it?
Sure.
So one thing that I wanted to say, and it relates a little bit to what you're saying and what we were talking about before, is that I feel like technology kind of took all the glory of it. Like, it's a very important component of all these amazing services that we have these days, but there's all the other disciplines that come into this. When you were talking about the Apple stores, like, it's not only the technology of having the register that is movable, but also like the marketing strategy behind that, and all these little pieces that come together. And I feel like all of us, in whatever job that we do, we kind of are becoming experts, and that relates to what Jan was talking about before. It's like at these edge cases and like these antidisciplinaries that you find in companies. And I feel like a big transition that we've seen since the 2000s to now is that like the figures of people in between disciplines have gone to higher roles, and that's what generates these interesting dynamics that come up with these innovative products. And then regarding what you were saying, I was thinking that I think that what has changed the most in these cycles is the adoption. Like, I feel like we talk about early adopters, people that like are willing to take this initial risk of using a technology, like buying online. Maybe my package is not going to come. Maybe I just put money and nothing's going to come out. Or if I do online banking, maybe I'm going to get hacked and I lose my money or whatever, right? And I feel like what we've achieved over the years is like these periods are shorter and shorter. So we see innovation that goes at a pace that I feel like we won't be able to continue to grow at that scale. At some point we'll be overwhelmed by that, and we'll have to pick our battles. Right now it's a pretty exciting time because I think we still can keep up.
So do you feel like, sorry, I'm getting over a cough, so that sounds a little bit funny, but do you feel like that consumers are just more trusting, or is it the convenient thing to use?
Well, I feel like there's a lot of success cases, and that people are becoming, more accustomed. Like, oh yeah, I've done online shopping for years. Why not? I'm gonna do online dating, and you just like go from one to another, and you just keep, getting comfortable and exploring more possibilities. And I feel like businesses is the same. Like sometimes it sounds scary to, open services online because maybe your data is going to get hacked, or because you have issues with privacy of your customers, etc. But in the end, it pays off, and so
I think people are less worried about their data getting hacked, because their data is getting hacked all the time and reset and reset. I mean, how many times a year do you get mailed a new credit card? You know what I mean? Proactively. I think the medical field is pretty interesting to look at for this question, because I wonder if it's privacy of information anymore versus permanence of information. People are more afraid that the data is going to be used out of context. And, sure, there's always going to be Luddites that are kind of, in 2000 I was afraid of direct deposit. But seriously. But the whole thing with the medical technology and Internet of Things, that is a major issue in the United States, that we have and we want this expectation that you can walk into any doctor and they're going to know everything you've ever been through and have your full tricorder or whatever. It's all right there on one thing. But there's nothing in our infrastructure that's set up that way for a reason. And it's because we're afraid that, our medical data will be correlated with our credit check, and then then our potential job prospects would be diminished because we didn't pay a bill or because we had way too many cases of bronchitis one year. You know, I think it's what we're more afraid of what people are going to do if they have access to our data. It's statistically, getting your identity ripped off is still statistically more possible through paper methods than digital methods. Literally dumpsters of paper in landfill. So I think it's less about fear of privacy versus fear of judgment. You know?
And I have to, as many interviews that we've done with people about, how to, secure login for their finances, and it still amazes me. I'm like, wait a minute. Like we were saying, we could make this your account information, or we could do something where you could, would this be something that maybe do a gamification thing where you were competing on, when you were with your friends about like how much your account was earning or something, and said, oh, I would never share that with my friends. And it's like, but wait a minute, when we were talking 20 minutes ago, you share with your friends what you look like naked and drunk, but you just don't want them to know how much money you earned? It's like,
what role does the designer, or do businesses who put these products out, what role do we have, what responsibility do we have in terms of ensuring that there's this quality of life? Like, obviously these technologies are taking over people's lives in some way, like the way that social media is sort of dominating the amount of time we spend in front of computers. My kids are perfect examples. It's real effort to take them away from these experiences. What responsibility do you think we have to ensure that there's what we're producing is actually resulting in happiness at the end of the day, that it's not pure innovation and commerce, and that it's really resulting in sort of healthy, happy lives?
I don't know if we're there on the filtering aspect yet.
Meaning?
So like when you think about, like you're talking about like the social networks, nowadays everything has an inbox. Like I can think like people have my phone number and they can text me, but then I also have 2 emails and then I have a Twitter account and there's a direct message thing on that. I'm a part of maybe 6 or 7 Slack teams where people can reach me directly, not to mention Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. There's so many, and people can all reach me directly, but there's not a good way for me to filter out how they can reach me. Like I have to selectively choose either not to read it or not to answer or not to be a part of that network. I haven't found a good solution for that yet.
Is that an individual responsibility, or is that a problem that we should be helping to solve?
I think so. I think that's definitely like a huge cognitive load on a lot of people, especially people who grew up like, I joined MySpace when I was 14, you know what I mean? And that was just kind of like, we're just gonna start doing this, we're old enough, it's like the basis. I don't remember a world before there were social networks, and then I just jumped onto the next one and onto the next one. So I haven't figured out a good solution other than like for my own physical sanity, I need to put on do not disturb hours on my Slack and all of those, and just choose not to answer DMs from people I don't know, and
right.
things like that. But that's definitely a huge problem that I think there's a lot of potential to solve.
Other thoughts on that?
I think this is a very important issue because we tend to, and I'm the first one to do this, get carried away by the possibilities of a specific technology or a discipline, and you forget about a lot of other aspects that are important, especially social aspects. So I feel like it's always a healthy activity to kind of reflect, am I doing something that in the end is going to be really useful or not, and like how are the things that you're contributing to create affecting the world in general? And I think that you have to check yourself. I try to do it as often as possible to keep the sanity there. So yeah, I certainly think that we have a responsibility. Everyone who's designing anything or creating any tool has a responsibility on the use of that tool, and we do it constantly. So I think it's good to remember that.
Yeah, I think back to a lot of us have kids, and we see how their expectations are just completely different. There's no understanding of linear media. There's no understanding that everything isn't available on demand, you know. Yeah, I mean, I think, I would hope that there's not too many designers out there, you know, purposely making things that would destroy, you know, interpersonal. Beyond that, we're gonna need time to catch up. You know, we're gonna need, and it takes generations. One thing I can't get over, my business partner, he wears an iWatch, an Apple Watch, excuse me. And you know, everybody that I work with has them, everybody. And I decided for whatever reason, I'm not gonna get one, I'm gonna watch people. And maybe that's arrogant, but what I've noticed is that I can't get over the fact that every time a message comes in, I think he's checking the time and needs to go somewhere else. I can't get over that. I can't, no matter what. You know, so I think it's going to be up to us to curate our inputs. I mean, as I get older, like, I can't deal. You know, like, yeah, Skype, Slack, email, text. You know, I simply just don't open a lot of applications for a good half of the day. But I think kids are going to have to, I think it's going to be increasingly difficult to teach kids mindfulness.
Sure.
You know?
Just we'll pivot a little bit into the sort of business world and the role that design plays in it today as opposed to where it's been historically. Do you see a major shift in how design has a seat at the table in terms of really having authority and really driving business today in ways that it wasn't, say, 10 years ago? What kind of change have you seen?
I'll start with that. I've seen, I think, much like I think that we were talking about earlier about the trust with individuals, it's growing, and the cycles are shortening of trust, of leaping from one thing to the next. I think as the corporations are just bigger, more complicated organisms that decide by committee, right? And they're moving a lot slower. So I think that depending where you are, I know that there are some very much leading organizations that are design first and really think about what they do from a design perspective. But most of them, at least the ones that I deal with in the agency world, is they're just slow, right? They're slower than we are, and I have a hard time getting them. They're kind of where we were 5 years ago in many ways in terms of their process, and they're like, oh, then let's, you know, we're already starting to think about how to do things leaner and how to fail immediately, and that success is really immediate failure, and how do we get to an MVP and all these kinds of things that are risky. And the most, quote, enlightened organizations that I deal with are the ones that have finally found UX as a thing, and they want to spend 2 months interviewing and researching and really perfecting kind of a product vision to get to a place where they can enter a market where it's safer, right? And they still have, again, so I think corporations have that fear of safety. I know that the startup world is much different, but in terms of businesses, organisms that have these large, lots of decision makers and lots of people and lots of, again, it's just complicated, and that they're just slower, I found. With some exceptions, for sure.
Would you say that, talking more about the selling of creative services, I guess my perspective is that where 10, 15 years ago I had to spend more energy educating customers on why they should invest in design, right. Those conversations are sort of off the table now, that there's sort of a new baseline where it's sort of generally understood that we need to spend resources and cycles on this if we expect to compete and if we expect to innovate. Do you see that same kind of shift? Is it easier to, is it a different conversation when you're sitting down with customers than it was before?
To me it is, yeah. Anyway, but yes, I think it's very much a different thing. Most of them believe it has to happen. Our struggle now is how we implement it, what we design, what the prioritization around that is, what the balances of the users are versus what the stakeholders need out of whatever you're engaging with. but for the most part, for me, I think we no longer have to talk about why research is important. I think most people know that informed decision-making is better decision-making, and we've moved on beyond that, but now what's the next step? Is it 4 months before we kind of build something? Like that's kind of where I'm at with that.
So it's understanding the value, but not necessarily knowing how to move it forward, right? There's still a long way to go for companies to really understand how to put that into practice.
Or they put it in a box that's just a design box, right? That doesn't really necessarily infiltrate the rest of their organization. They don't apply that same kind of thinking to other ways of conducting their business, which I think if you see the Fortune 500 chart where the most profitable companies are design-led, and I think those are the ones that actually have design thinking at the very top, not just at the top of the creative or organization. It's like this prioritization of design thinking even higher, and I think that's the next place that you'll see it could go, at least the bigger corporations.
Yeah. I mean, I would echo that. I mean, you know, especially when it's, you know, there's a demand for change, that they're more accepting of design as an alternative or as a solution to enable them to solve whatever issues they are. But yeah, I mean, at Altitude, I mean, it's depending on the industry you're in, they're slower to change, especially on the business side and the B2B side. That they're still putting design in a box, but I think it's also our responsibility to help with that adoption within that organization. You know, to help them like think about it in a different way, because, you know, especially in the B2B side, they are really slow to change, and if we can design it in such a way to help them, and maybe it's just a progressive way, you know, instead of like in one disruptive leap, it's like just incremental change, you know, that helps.
I think there's, you know, just like any industry, I think that they, you know, in their industry, they could be a dinosaur if they don't figure out how to change quickly. So design is definitely, for the larger companies like IBM, they realize that if they don't change the way they do business, then there is going to be some disruptive, you know, startup that's going to come around and overnight, like they'll be on the other side of an Uber, you know, in their industry as well. So
I think that it's not the hard sell that it was 10 years ago. I think the big difference in what I think, you know, research, it's not unlike what Jan was saying before, you know, research done in parallel with practice. You know, the more you sell that to a client, the more they understand that research isn't necessarily something that's done in a vacuum that prevents anything else from starting. You know, we talk about how we use research to solve problems, but we also use research to find the right problems to solve. And you just don't, it's just not something that can happen in a vacuum. You've got to try, iterate, not just on the solution, but on the problem and finding the right problem.
And I don't know if this is kind of a to take off that, is that there's, what we do at MassArt is we have this part of our organization that's organizational design, and what we found is that what we are, as an agency model, what we're often brought in is people hire us to come in and think about something cool and build something for them and ship it off and hand it off to them and allow them to, you know, take that, put it on the tracks and let them run with it. But in the end, that almost always fails to some extent, right? Because it's almost like you're raising this child, and then you take the child from like a bad parent, and then you raise it, and you kind of, you morph it into this great little child, and you just hand it back to this parent that doesn't know how to be a parent, right? And then
Who's the bad parent?
So then it becomes this thing where so what we do is we go into organizations and try and train them, because it's cultural. Design is culture, right? It's environmental, and if you just give something into another environment, it's going to slowly morph back into that culture. And so we have a team that goes in and trains and talks about design process and how to embed this thinking into their organization, and that's incredibly hard, and that's not even getting that much traction because they buy off on it ideally, but the practice and implementation of something like that into, again, a big like healthcare organization is incredibly complex because there's so much obstacles with that. But I think that's the kind of thing we're running into, so we're trying to solve it by getting to the head of that and trying to trickle down culture design way from that very top level, and that's a challenge. But I think that's for companies that are big, so big and so slow, it's almost impossible for them to shift that ship in any sort of meaningful, quick way, right? So it's like they're trying to get some way to do it.
The fact that almost all companies realize the need of design, it's I think already like a big step, especially when you take into consideration like the Yahoo website from 2000s.
Right.
But certainly like there's some companies that take it more in-house, and I feel like maintain a balance of like whatever they were doing, incorporate design, incorporate technologies, incorporate people with a marketing vision, and those are, when you have like that melting pot that is balanced, I think that's when you get the best. If you put too many designers, you're also going to fail.
Right.
Yes,
Exactly.
that's exactly right.
And I think one of the challenges when you're, whether it's a small agency or whatever, is going into a big company where they're saying, oh, we need you to do this app or this, and it's like, well, wait a minute, you have this end-to-end, and I think this is what companies are starting to understand, is that customer experience is end-to-end. I mean, Amazon kills it because from like, they think about every part of the transaction. And so if you're not thinking about it, and that's again, like you were saying, the Apple experience, it's not just the fact that you can check out, it's everything. The thing that got you into the store, it's the device, it's the experience on the device, and how we, the follow-up, the end-to-end experience. And when companies don't recognize it, when they engage like a Mad Pow, it's like, no, I need you to help us, like, what should our phone reps be saying? Because then the experience, the digital experience has to marry up with what they're doing all the way down the line to like, what's the thank you note that we're putting in the package when we ship it? Like, and that I think is the opportunity for design. And again, agencies are going to have to start thinking about the fact that, well, all these companies are going out and they're eating, they're buying up every kind of artificial intelligence expertise they can right now. And oh, by the way, while they're doing that, they're hiring script writers who aren't working in Hollywood, because it doesn't make any sense to have IA if you haven't got a voice to it that can, that any human being wants to listen to. So it's like there's this whole next wave of experience design, end to end, and it's experience and service design. It has to.
Chris, I think one of the things I hear when you describe that is the perspective of the team coming in to help with a particular initiative. What's their perspective on is, I'm here to execute on what you've decided needs to be executed, or am I here to make sure that the right questions are being asked and that we're focused on those, right? That will set you in a very different direction in terms of how the project's handled, right?
But it reminds me, I remember when I first started working in a small agency, there was a restaurant that we were pitching, and I remember we went out and the owner came out and he had us have a meal, and he was like, so, I want you guys to design some ads and a new menu, and my boss was like, you need a new chef. We can't do anything for you.
So let's pivot a little bit around that topic of critical thinking versus design execution, and the sort of skills around producing thoughtful design versus real critical skills. And I guess the question, moving into a little bit of the design education theme, is what do you need from institutions like MassArt, graduating design students, from undergraduate programs? What are the things you're looking for when you're hiring, and how do you feel right now that alignment is? Like, is there good alignment between the sort of critical thinking and sort of technical skills, or is it weighted one way or another? Some feedback for organizations like MassArt would probably be helpful. Your thoughts, anybody?
The biggest thing that we look for when we're hiring, and startups are a little bit different because speed is our advantage, and if we're going to go up against those big companies, that we need to be moving and shipping faster than they can. We ship every day, if not every week. But we need people that can talk to non-designers, specifically engineers. Like, that's one of the most valuable skills we can have, is to communicate, like, the thing that you went and spent all this time and effort researching and thinking up and like plotting and planning and designing. If you can't communicate that to the person that's going to build it, then it doesn't really represent what you had in mind to begin with. So that's like so critical and key, and a little bit of HTML and CSS knowledge can really go a long way. Like I can feedback to my engineers in CSS sometimes. If they give me like a staging link, then I can just go in the inspector and change a couple things to get it the way I want it to look, and then I literally just screenshot the pieces of code I changed and send it back to them, and they know exactly what I did.
Other perspectives on sort of graduating class and how prepared they are for, you know, starting work in businesses like the ones that you're running.
Go ahead.
I mean, I would add to that. I mean, you know, in terms of what we look for, you know, we look for people that, you know, work well in ambiguity, because that's what we do every day. It's like we try and just, you know, make straight the big cotton ball of mess that's out there. And you know, so we look for candidates that are like that, but also we look for people that have the humility to basically remove their own biases, because that's the thing. Because, you know, part of the skills as a designer is that you need to have empathy. You need to have empathy to use it. You're not designing for yourself. You're designing for someone else. and that's a key that we look for. And also, yeah, because the teams nowadays are so interdisciplinary, and you know, you may be working with an engineer, you may be working with someone else, and that they have to be comfortable within that and have the candor to talk about that, you know, in a mixed team. And I think, you know, it would be great, and I don't know whether it's been done already, but you know, to like have cross collaboration between different classes, different disciplines. I mean, that all builds experience in working in collaboration, because that's what we do every single day.
Yeah, working with people that aren't like you is part of building empathy, right? Right.
I learned a lot from doing hackathons.
Yeah.
Going to like weekend hackathons, they always need designers, always. It's always like everyone from MIT and Tufts, like with their fun, like mathematical ideas, and they need a designer. And if you can go and spend 2 days in a room with a pizza and a couple engineers, there's a lot you can get done, and you can really surprise yourself. So I like that.
So any other thoughts around what sorry, did you have
No, sorry. What I was going to say is that I think that one of the most important things, because you want to have these multidisciplinary teams, is character. I think that like it takes a specific type of person to sit in a room and listen to someone who's talking about something that they don't know anything about, and continue to listen and like try to see how they can contribute to that conversation and start the back and forth. So I think that that's characteristic number one. And then number two for me is people that can speak with something tangible. Like people who can like create quickly a sketch, prototype, something that like you bring to a meeting that is more than words. Because words, everybody interprets them differently, but when you actually show something that like, oh, I get it, that way you ensure that the experience translates, and the person that is going to collaborate with you and is going to do the technical part or the design part or whatever part of the project, they get your end of the thing. And I think that you want to have teams where everybody can do that, coming from wherever discipline they come from. So these are, to me, the two most important things. And I sacrifice like experts to get people that are more like that.
And I would add, well, the thing that I look for primarily is I really want to understand how somebody in the room can solve how they can solve problems. Like that's our space is problem solving, and more often than not, problem solving in perfect conditions, right? Without as much time or without as much thing. You never have the perfect runway. You never have all you need to do what you need to do. So I often have, I spend time with new candidates and things just with a whiteboard, with a problem I'm trying to solve, and seeing how they help me with it. Like how can we collaborate? How do you communicate with me? How would you communicate with a stakeholder? And then how do you think through a problem? And then, by the way, tell me about how you've solved other problems that got you here. Like, to me, that problem-solving component is super important. It's particularly relevant in the user experience portion and strategy portion of things, but that's also very much design as well. And so that's what I look for.
So we're going to have a few more questions. We're getting to the point where we do want to leave some time for audience Q&A. So in this sort of wrap up, looking ahead sort of category of questions, I would ask anybody to jump in with this, but what do you think are the big problems that the collective wisdom of sort of design community should be focused on moving forward? Like what are the things that really deserve that energy and attention? There's got to be a few of them.
Yeah. Well, I think if we sort of, as you anticipate where things are coming to the Internet of Things, I think, what are going to be the kinds of interfaces other than, these phones? Like if your refrigerator's gonna talk to you, like what's gonna make that less creepy? But there's a huge opportunity there. I think, when we think about it now, it's like, so the Amazon Echo is probably like the equivalent of CompuServe, back in the day. So this is the first stab at it, but it can be done, it can be done so much more interestingly and elegantly, and we just need people who can think outside of the box. Like, what are all the things, and it's going to become, it's going to take in aspects of performance art that we don't do now, because if we're going to be, if the interface becomes environmental, then there's all of these other things that we've, everybody who's been spending all their time learning Photoshop and stuff. It's like, well, it's now different, and so I think those are the kinds of things we're hiring, we're hiring mixes of philosophers and, people who can do video, because, we have to create content. There's just this ton of stuff that is not in the traditional, graphic design model. It's much more like take humanities courses, bring something to the game that's really with a world view.
Other thoughts?
I think. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say, I think one other thing is there's no longer just kind of one audience for what we're doing. Back to what Jan was saying earlier, how people learn in different ways. We need to start setting like A, B, and C plans for the different type of people that we're trying to capture. A good example is Trunk Club. They have their stylists that they set up a call with you. And some people like calls, but once they did a presentation last week in San Francisco, and they talked about how they shifted the basis of their interface around messaging, and they found that they were able to capture more people, because some people prefer messaging, some people still prefer phones, and they sort of set up two lines of experience to grow their business. And we need to start thinking multi-directionally, I think.
I think one of the big challenges for designers, and I keep thinking about how to solve this, is we're losing. So it used to be in classic design that you had affordances, and then when you do UX, you have affordances. But now you're talking to things that don't even know if you're looking at you or hearing you, and there's no really affordance of like what you can ask Siri or Alexa or whoever you're talking to, and that is a big challenge that still hasn't been solved, and I have no idea how to solve it. And I'm just gonna put it out there.
I mean, that's an exciting time, right? To you think about the Internet of Things and data-driven design, and not necessarily knowing how customers are going to be interacting. What are the possibilities of these relationships? That's where things get pretty interesting, right?
And you're designing now platforms, right? You
Right.
design Siri or Alexa as a platform for third-party developers to develop their own apps on top of. So it's levels of separation from what the user is going to end up using the system for. And that is incredibly challenging, and I don't even know if the strategies that we're using are okay. I guess we'll fail and learn from it. But yeah, there's a lot of challenges, I think, with the departures that we're taking lately. And I think that's, again, because we are sometimes doing things just because they're possible. Like, oh, yeah, we developed algorithms that can understand what you're saying. Let's do an interface that just takes commands by voice. Are there challenges? Sure, but we'll figure it out. Let's just roll it out. And some products stick and some products don't. And before it was much more calculated what you would release and what you wouldn't.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're not designing things anymore. We're designing moments, right? And moments are very subjective. So if you think about like War of the Worlds, some people listened to that and knew it wasn't reality. And some people thought it was reality. And this is kind of what you're getting to. If the interface is disappearing, if it's just a moment in an end-to-end transaction of something, how do you make something where one person understands the context of it and another person for themselves, and someone else doesn't because of their own personal background? It's they're running into this with like Oculus and everything.
Of course.
You know.
A lot of technologies nowadays have,
Right.
but I wanted to follow up a thought that you said before that made me think a lot. It's like the thing about the watch, like people
Yeah.
like interrupting you to watch the thing. I feel like I was thinking, if I was now 15, I would have never worn a watch.
Right.
So I don't know that looking at a watch is something that people do when they're thinking that.
Right.
So like, I wonder if like the people who are natives to these, voice-based interfaces, they're not going to be as frustrated as I am when I ask the interface to do something and it just doesn't understand me, or my accent is weird and like they translate the word wrong or something, and it's really frustrating. And you're in the car and you're like, shouting, no, send the message that does this.
What's true universally. So one, thank you for pointing out hold and. What's true universally is you have two human beings and one of them is taken out of the moment, whether it's acceptable or uncomfortable or just a moment in time that passes like no other. Like I think, is you gotta get somewhere?
Yeah.
My daughter may be like, oh, yeah, she just got a Snapchat, no big deal, we'll just keep having that conversation. But it is taking away from being in the moment, whether you accept it or
It
not.
is changing social norms. I'll take that one.
And it's,
I don't think you might perceive it as taking it away from the moment or not.
yeah.
It's just different than it was before.
It's a fascinating debate, and that one could go on for a long time. Quickly, any final thoughts? We'd like to reserve a little time for audience QA. Why don't we end it there, and we'll continue with some audience questions. Ben.
Is there a problem with designers for user experience trying to anticipate a user's desires that results in oversimplification? I'm thinking of sometimes in the Apple interface where I can hear the designers thinking, you don't want to worry your pretty little head about all those export options from the QuickTime player. You only want 2 options, so we'll only give you 2 options. And do you see any problems with the way that anticipation of what the people will need results in kind of dumbing down?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I'm answering, but I don't know. I'm just gonna say that, design has limitations, and also technology has limitations, and like the only difference here is that you know that a person is behind those limitations, but it may be a technology that is behind those limitations, and it's in the end it's a product, and it is what it is, right? But yeah, I think that design being a social science. It ends up being a human decision, and then you can blame someone.
Well, would you say is it more related to how open you are to recognizing the sort of how the intention and the reality of the experience either align or misalign, right? So it's if you're blind to that, if there's not a feedback loop, then those assumptions can be very dangerous. But you've got to start with something, right? You're always going to make assumptions. I guess for me, the question is, how open are you to learning from real world usage and factoring that into the way you improve things?
Well, and I think it does go back to that idea that over time, there is going to be a natural evolution of product. And I know, how many of us were sad when they took our cassette player out of the cars because, that was a diminishing thing. So now it's, God, I would have had like 8-track. If our car company was meeting my needs, the 80-20 rule, and we roll off.
Right, yeah.
Luke, go ahead.
So when asked the question about what problems design should solve, it seems like the answers revolved around more like the technologies that need to be solved, not things like, and this is the question, can design solve things like a failing economy, or problems with violence and terrorism, or how we relate to each other in a more social present situation, as opposed to the opposite, which was talked about a lot here. And if so, what's the best way designers can tackle those problems?
I'd say it's no and yes, because first of all, I think design, and really good design, does have a tremendous amount of power to change behavior. And just like a little example, like in the Pokemon Go game, like if you're going to play it, you have to walk. So here's a game that gets all those people who are stuck behind a game where used to be playing a game like this, and you actually have to get out and walk. So I mean, but the question is there a commercial? Is someone want to make that commercial effort to do that?
So the Pokemon Go example is like it was the most insane thing that I've ever experienced, because I played, and I was out at like 12:30 at night, and there were just throngs of people in the street playing. But then you would see all these articles pop up, specifically about the Pokemon Go example, about people like tweeting like now I have an excuse to leave my house. Now I'm out there making friends. Oh, I met my new boyfriend because we met in a park, like playing Pokemon Go. And it actually had a really positive effect on mental health, which is really interesting. And I would never have expected that from a game.
Yeah.
I think behavior change as a thing is becoming, like, there are people, you're right, that's kind of a buzzword now, right? So now there are designers that are behavior change designers, and we have them in MassArt, and they focus mostly now on healthcare, healthcare outcomes, pre-diabetic kind of things, and giving walking apps and very analog, very basic kind of foundational things. But I do think that's where a lot of that might go. Right now it's at the beck and call of a corporation that wants better outcomes healthcare-wise to improve a bottom line, maybe experience. But I think that behavior change is really digging into behavioral science as design, and I think that is something, at least in my experience, I haven't seen that depth of that happening, or that the respect for that as a field or a portion of design until very recently. And I think that could be where things like that, like social change, happen when people really understand how to use technology to change behavior in a good way. Or we've all been doing behavior change design, like bigger buttons, smaller text. Like that's been our way to do it until now. But now there's actually better. I think we're getting more sophisticated with that. So.
Another question in the back.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm one of the students here in the DFI program. I'm in the second year. I had a list of questions. I'm going to go with just one. Clearly, I don't want to overwhelm anybody. So, this was prompted by Christina's comment about sort of the generally people not being so concerned about hacking, which was like foreign words to me. So my question is, how are we going to build? How do you guys in the design field, at where you are, anticipate building trust from the user without a one-size-fits-all kind of mechanism? One of the problems I find a lot of times with any kind of app is that it doesn't really fit the complete needs that I have, but it's been tested. There's been focus groups to understand that there's research been done, but it still doesn't fit the needs that it was being created to do so. And with a lot of this, you are inputting your own information, a lot of your own private information that, for me at Elyse, I'm very resigned to giving in, but have to if I want to interact with any of my tools. So how do you maintain that trust, knowing that security is a big issue, regardless of the complacency that we have to live with by offering information?
All right, there's a lot packed in that question. So there were sort of I heard two things. One is, how do you ensure that trust is instilled in that transaction? Also, how do you know that you're building the right products? You talked a little bit about maybe the gap between your actual needs and the assumed needs that the product is solving. Is that
Those are, it's a two-part question.
okay?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Any thoughts on that?
I don't think trust is built, I think it's earned. I think that, and it's hard to answer with specific examples, but, if I'm downloading an app to do something, whatever, have somebody pick up my laundry, you know what I mean? Don't ask me for my social security number. I think, and trust is built over time, and trust is a two-way street, too, everyone in this room has paid a lot of money over the years to buy Apple products. They don't all, they let us down sometimes,
I get the employee
right?
discount.
Even Apple, are gods. They've let us down sometimes, but they've done more good than harm. So we forgive them. It's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to answer, and part of me wants to say, and this could sound terrible, you almost have no choice.
Yeah.
You almost have no choice. Like if I talk to, folks that are over, 60 or 70 years old, the notion of a cashless society was on the level of biblical foretelling apocalypse type of stuff. I haven't been to you can deposit your checks, you can transfer money, you can just pick up your phone and scan stuff. I mean,
I think there is a really dangerous trend especially in technology, of assuming that products are free because nothing is free. And now you have email with Gmail, and you have Facebook, and you have all these things, and you pay nothing for this. You could pay for your own server of emails that you control, and nobody's going to access it, and you can put the security there that you want. And so, and I hate to put it on the customer because it's not. As a society, I think we have to think about this. But I would love to have an alternative to Gmail that it's a paid version that I know they're not going to put ads in my email, and they're not going to use my data. They're not even going to keep it because I'm paying for it so that they don't keep it. But this model is not what works well with startups that get 1 million users and sell, and that's kind of what in the model that we are right now. So it's a really deep society, capitalist in society, and it can go up to philosophical ways about how we perceive these things, and our society gets pushed in different ways.
that's back to his question.
Yeah,
too.
that's also
follow the money.
And then,
But
and I
we're
wanted
still
to say,
humans. Follow the resources.
I wanted to say, I think it's not only designers to your question; it should be everyone. I think that the thing to me that it's missing in most of the things that we're doing is the social aspect. It's where is it taking us? And Jan was talking about the singularity, and I have a lot of beef to pick with singularity. but one thing is what are you doing to prevent it if it freaks you out so much?
I think the other thing is that what I do see happening is I think that now you're starting to see some startups in Silicon Valley where people are saying, oh, wait a minute, there's actually an opportunity to create a product that, if you had a particular beef, this is company, I can't remember the name, but they thought that all of the big banks, the credit card, or the big banks that, when you use a debit card and and it's everyone, if you're a parent and your kids go to college, the first thing they do is they buy something and now they're $1 in debt on they went over their limit on their cash card. So they get hit with a $45 fee. And the thing is that then it's it went down by 35 cents, and all the banks do it, all the debit cards. are this, where did they arrive at $45? Like if I went over $1, you're gonna do it like 5 times in a row. But you're gonna keep, you know, he's buying another candy bar. We're gonna charge him 30. So they were like, no, we're not gonna do that. We can actually turn a profit, but never charge that fee, and we will go after every college student with that, you know, and so like they find a niche, and they feel like we are a morally responsible debit card company, and so there are these places that are springing up because they think by being a little more honest than the rest of the industry, they can disrupt.
That's so true.
And then they got bought by.
We're gonna have to make this the last comment. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, Slack does that. They have this fair billing policy where like you pay by the user, and if you have people on your team that are using it, they just don't charge you just because it's fair.
Yeah.
And then like Amazon, like if a package doesn't show up at your house, not a problem. They're gonna ship out another one. Same with Google. Like if you discover a company that you're gonna buy something from on Google, they have this program that most companies are a part of called Google Trusted Services, and like Google will vouch for that company if like the product you get isn't what you want, like Google pays you back. It's the same thing as like Nordstrom, like you can bring back a dress like that you bought 10 years ago, just take it because the relationship with you is more valuable than that one transaction.
Thank you very much. We're a little bit over time, so I think we're going to wind this down. Please, well, first a round of applause for this. Thank you all. Thanks for spending the day with us. There's a couple of quick things. There's a gallery right next door. We encourage you to go over there first, explore that exhibit, and stick around. There'll be a reception. Have a drink. Love to chat. Let's continue the conversation. Thanks, and have a great night.
That was so fun.
Yeah, that was great.